It's Tuesday, October 28th, and Melissa is making its historic landfall in Jamaica. Right about now, we can see that it's starting to wobble a whole bunch right here from satellite, and this means that it's going to make that final turn towards the north into the Black River region of Jamaica. That's where we're expecting it to come onto shore in the morning hours today, and this is going to bring a lot of really unfortunate impacts. Once again, Melissa has defied our expectations. It has strengthened all the way up to a 175 mile an hour sustained wind in sub 910 millibar major category 5 hurricane. We can see how much convection is happening around the center. It almost looks like this storm is still intensifying with how deep the convection is. All this pink layer right here is a sign of some really deep convection occurring. So to still see that happening at sub 908 millibars shows that even more intensification is possible. But back to those impacts, pretty much everywhere east in Jamaica of its landfall point, there's going to be the potential for anywhere between 10 to upwards of 15 feet of storm surge, and that's going to be accompanied by some massive waves, potentially upwards of 30 feet in height. Another thing, of course, is going to be those winds. We mentioned that 175 mile an hour sustained winds is currently where it's at. It's also gusting in excess of 200 miles an hour, so that is going to be a very big threat for where it makes landfall. It is important to note that those strongest winds do only extend about 10 nautical miles away from the center of the eye, but it is also another important thing to note that pretty much the entire island is going to be engulfed by upper echelon tropical storm winds. And then closest to the eye is going to be anywhere between hurricane force to anywhere up in between that hurricane force and 175 mile an hour threshold. Now, rainfall is something that has been the big story in pretty much for over the last 24 hours. It has been pouring in almost the entire country. So also in Jamaica, already a bunch of rainfall has been dumped, but when it's all said and done, a lot of the country will be seeing totals in excess of 30 in isolated spots, which could even be anywhere between 40 to 60 inches of rain. So there are all of the impacts that we're expecting right there. Now, what will be the actual strength of Melissa when it makes landfall? Will it be able to maintain this monster status that it's at sub 900 millibar and 175 mile an hour sustained winds? The HAFSA model, which I think has been the closest to what has actually happened with Melissa so far, is predicting that it might actually almost retain that status and could even strengthen a little. We can see that's bringing it down to sub 900 millibar pressure, which means that it will see a little bit of a period of strengthening. And then when it makes landfall, it could be anywhere between where it's at right now and then 905 millibars in pressure. That would indicate that Melissa would retain most of its strength when it comes onto shore. Now, that's definitely not a good thing, as the National Hurricane Center is actually predicting that we could see a little bit of a weakening trend, but it would still make landfall as a Category 5 hurricane. At that point, anywhere between a Category 5 status and 170 miles an hour. Doesn't really matter. It's going to be catastrophic devastation across the island, pretty much no matter what at that point. And for the future track past Jamaica, it has now been pretty much confirmed that Melissa will make a landfall in southeastern Cuba as a major hurricane. It looks like it could be around Category 3, maybe weak Category 4 strength when it does that. Then after it passes through southeastern Cuba, it looks like the Bahamas could take some impacts. We can see that we now have hurricane warnings in place for those areas as well. And also a big story with Melissa has been its slow moving speed. Currently, it is about to come to a stall before it makes that final jump towards Jamaica as it makes that northward turn. But when it's actually going through the country, it's still going to be moving pretty slow, unfortunately, which means that those impacts will be slightly prolonged with parts of the eye wall and the strongest levels of surge and rain and pretty much all of the above for hurricane impacts that you would normally expect. So the current question is, how does Melissa continue to defy these sky-high expectations that are set for it? We've already been expecting for it to reach Category 5 hurricane status, and now it has surpassed that, turning it into a 175 mile an hour sustained storm. And this is why right here, it is in almost a picture-perfect environment for hurricane strengthening. We can see that deep layer shear in the atmosphere is really going to be favorable for development. That is going to be highlighted by these little green bands right here. Also, it is in an extremely moist environment, and the sea surface temperatures, that's going to be the most important thing, are around 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And those aren't just on the surface, but those extend deep into the water. So it is pretty much a meteorologically perfect setup for Melissa to strengthen, and that is why we've continued to see it defy our expectations almost every hour. Now, moving away from Melissa, we do actually have a little bit of a surprise severe weather event that could unfold today in parts of eastern Texas and near the Mississippi River Valley. It is also a pretty isolated marginal risk, but it does include parts like Houston, Texas. So definitely going to want to be on the lookout for this one. There is also a general thunderstorm threat that expands further up into the Mississippi River Valley into parts of southern Missouri, even, and also parts of western Mississippi. But right now, for our actual marginal risk, that's going to be the area where we're expecting the strongest severe weather to take place. Currently, the SPC only has it for a hail risk. I definitely think that's going to be in play. I think we could see some larger hail with this as well, but they have not highlighted a wind nor a tornado risk, which I think is interesting because I definitely think those two could be in play. And here's how this is likely going to unfold. We're going to have a big, powerful cold front coming in from the north, kind of moving through parts of Dallas and Fort Worth around lunch today. Then after that, we're going to get some storm initiation in our main risk area. Probably in the early afternoon hours, they're going to start as just some blips before they kind of mature and turn into some stronger cells. Now, it looks like this is going to be a more messy and linear mode, but specifically up here near parts of southern Arkansas in northern Louisiana, I think there could be an elevated risk for tornadoes because we're going to have that low pressure center pretty much right here, and we're going to have a cold front and warm front complex enhancing the shear available to these storms, maybe even bringing the potential threat for a weak spin up tornado or two. I definitely would not rule that out. I think the ingredients are there, and I'd also say the ingredients are there pretty much all the way down our line into parts of Houston. I also think a damaging wind threat is going to be in play because the ingredients are going to be also favorable for that, but I also will say that a hail threat does look like it could happen. That is what the SPC currently has it highlighted for only right now. I'm just not super sure how big that hail would be. Definitely think it could be in excess of anywhere between 1.5 to 2 inches in diameter. Now, for that thunderstorm risk, that just general risk that extends into parts of southern Missouri and even Arkansas, I don't really think anywhere past southern Arkansas is going to see the chance to see some severe weather today. I think you could still see some gusty winds and some thunderstorms though, so definitely be on the lookout for that, and then also quite a bit of rain. And this is just a really zoomed in view for where our jet stream is and what it's going to be doing today. We see that as it ejects, it's going to bring quite a bit of forcing to our storms right around when we're expecting them to initiate, actually in the early afternoon hours. That's going to be highlighted by this yellow shade right here. That just means that the winds are going to be stronger and there's more forcing for our storms. I also think there could be a conditional threat for maybe a more discrete mode in the earlier stages. I think that's why that hail threat has been highlighted, and with that discrete mode and also some extra shear, maybe that could increase the threat for all hazards, maybe even a weak tornado or two, and then also some damaging winds. And this is a weather sounding for what that environment could look like. Definitely a whole lot of curvature in the lower levels of our hodograph and our low level shear and helicity, and even our cloud base is going to be low enough to definitely support that threat today. We're also expecting tons of bulk shear, almost 60 knots. We also have quite a bit of cape up here near our freezing level. So with those updrafts and maybe even a discrete mode, definitely think we could see maybe even 2-inch in diameter hail today. Now, the only thing that could be hindering this is that we do have a bit of a capping inversion at around the 1.5 kilometer kind of range in the atmosphere. Then it's also looking pretty saturated and stable all the way up to the 3rd kilometer in the atmosphere. But after that, we have some drier loft that could help with the lift in the atmosphere for these storms. And we also have a little bit of a baby inverted V profile coupled with a very moist environment on the surface. Definitely think we're going to be seeing some severe weather today. Also, our instability looks like it's going to be conducive for just a general severe weather threat. Even our precipitable water 1.67 inches. Definitely think it's going to help with that damaging wind threat. Even our down draft cape is in excess of 1,000. So I will say that all hazards of severe weather look to be on the table today in our marginal risk area. Not quite sure why the SPC hasn't highlighted that area for damaging winds and maybe even a weak tornado threat yet, but I would not be surprised to see them upgrade the risk for those threats in that marginal risk area. And that was a weather sounding taken from northern Louisiana, closest to that warm front. And here's just kind of a picture from even areas near Houston, kind of just showing that I think that threat for all hazards could extend all the way down into the more southern portions of our risk area. Even that's going to be because we're going to have quite a bit of instability nearing 2,000 joules per kilogram of Cape. Our cloud base is going to be low enough. We're going to have a very moist environment, actually a pretty high low level lapse rate, also quite a bit of dry air loft, and even our low level shear and bulk shear is going to be conducive for all hazards. Also, we even have a higher 3 Cape that could even just increase that general threat of severe weather and maybe even a tornado or two in the Houston area. So pretty much anywhere in our marginal risk area, I think all hazards of severe weather are going to be on the table today.